Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to Wednesday's writing. Today in your writing, you are asked to use this picture to create some ideas about this mushroom reading a book. I wonder what your story will be about. Your learning intention. Today we are learning to write interesting sentence for a purpose. You'll know you're successful when you name the purpose of your writing, when you're using interesting language to suit the purpose, and you've used correct punctuation so your writing makes sense. The purpose of my writing today is to entertain the reader using interesting language. I've been thinking about our shared reading story this week, and there's some great language I want to use in my writing. I loved this part of the story, a big, dark forest. That'll go well with my writing. And I like the part where they went through the mud and they called it thick and oozy. I'm going to collect this language and use part of it in my writing today. All right, I've got my writing here, and my writing was about the mushroom in the picture, just like you. And I've called it Anoki's Adventure. And I've been collecting some words from our shared reading. So we've been collecting the words like thick and oozy and big dark forest. So I'm going to try and use them in my writing today. And just like good writers do, I've started to plan my writing around my picture. And I know my writing is going to be about a spotty mushroom who loves to read in her garden. But one day she gets a little bit lost and her tiny friends come to save her. I've started a little bit of my writing here for you now. I'm going to read it out to you. Anoki, the spotty mushroom, loved to read in the garden. It was her happy place. So I'm going to think about what's going to come next, and I'm going to rehearse the sentence first because we like to say our sentence out loud. So I'm going to say, one day while walking, she took a wrong turn and ended up in the, I can use my language, in the big dark forest. Great way to use that language. Here we go. One day while walking, she took. Oh, I can hear that ooh sound, just like mushroom. I can hear that ooh. So I'm going to put that there. Took. She took a wrong turn and ended up in a big, looking at my language, dark forest. So I'm going back to reread. One day while walking, she took a wrong turn and ended up in a big dark forest. Great, that makes sense. I'm going to write the next part of my story, and she's a little bit worried and she calls out, I'm lost. We know that she's speaking, so I'm going to use my quotation marks, starting with my capital letter. I am lost. And I'm going to use an exclamation mark because she would really call that out loud. And I'm going to close my speech marks and say she cried, because she was crying at the time. She cried. Oops. Put a circle around that because I forgot the E. She cried. Okay. Now I know that Anoki sat down by the tree. So I'm going to say Anoki sat down by the tree to think. Anoki sat down by an old tree to think. And then Suddenly, the mud around her started to sink, and it wasn't just any mud, it was thick, oozy mud. So I'm going to say suddenly, because something suddenly happened. Suddenly, the thick, oozy mud started to sink. And I don't want to forget about her two tiny friends, and I'm just going to say, her two tiny friends arrived and said, we're just going to leave that to you to think about it. Her two tiny friends arrived and said. I'm going to stop that there because you might have to have your imagination about what's going to happen at the end of the story. But I'm going to do one last thing and reread my writing to check that it all makes sense. Anoki the spotted mushroom loved to read in the garden. It was her happy place. One day while walking, she took a wrong turn and ended up in a big dark forest. I am lost, she cried. Anoki sat down by an old tree to think. Suddenly, the thick oozy mud started to sink. Her two tiny friends arrived and said, and we'll leave it there. I wonder what your story about this spotted mushroom will be about. Today I've been thinking about how I've been successful in my writing. I can name my purpose, and my purpose was to entertain. And I even used some interesting language to suit my purpose. I used some language from my shared reading texts like thick and oozy and big dark forest. I even checked in my punctuation for my writing today to check that my punctuation made sense. I experimented with some quotation marks today when my character was speaking. I wonder if you might have a go using some quotation marks in your writing today.